Hi everyone, and welcome to our video on finding all solutions to a trig equation where it's completely factored on one side. So if it's completely factored on one side and already set equal to 0, then we're in really good shape. What we do is the zero product rule. So just like if you had x plus 5 times x minus 2 already factored and set equal to 0, we know it's not a good idea to FOIL this. Instead, we would just say, well, take each of those and set them equal to 0 and then continue solving. That's the same thing that we do in trig problems or anything that's factored really. As long as it's set equal to 0, we can instantly start picking it apart and setting each factor equal to 0. So I have tangent of x equals 0, 2 sine of x plus 1 equals 0, and then 2 cosine of x minus square root of 2 equals 0. Now, the tangent one's ready to go. The other two, we still want to isolate our trig functions. So this first, or the sine one, we should subtract 1. And we would have 2 sine of x equals negative 1. And then we should divide by 2. So we have sine of x equals negative 1/2. Now that's ready to go. Then let's get the cosine one also. So for the cosine one, let's just say it in words. I know we should add the square root of 2 over. So we have 2 cosine of x equals square root of 2. And then we should divide by 2. So we have cosine of x is square root of 2 over 2. So we have these three trig functions. I'm going to cloud that one first, and I'm going to use my unit circle to help me find answers. And I'm going to put them all on a single trig function or a single unit circle. I'm just going to mark them in different colors. All right, so where tangent of x is equal to 0 would be where the sine is also equal to 0. It is on the x-axis. So our angle of 0 and our angle of pi is where tangent is 0. So tangent of 0 is 0, tangent of pi is also 0. The sine of x equaling negative 1/2, I'm going to cloud that in blue. And I'm going to plot that. So those are y coordinates. All right, so where I have y coordinates that are negative 1/2 would be in quadrant 3 and 4. Close to the x-axis means there should be a 6 in the denominator. It's 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. And then our next one, cosine of x equals radical 2 over 2. It's positive. That's in our first quadrant at pi quarters and our fourth quadrant at 7 pi quarters. And then there we go. There's all of our answers. So we have 6 answers. So the purple, let's highlight them all because the ones I kept in black ink might get lost. Okay, so let's highlight them all. So those are 6 answers between 0 and 2 pi. It did say find all solutions though, or they could have just said solve. It's the same thing, solve. And I'm just going to put them in the order around the unit circle and add 2 pi k to all of them. So we're going to have x is equal to 0 plus 2 pi k, which on this one they might just say is just 2 pi k, but I like to show the 0 still. And then pi quarters plus 2 pi k, pi plus 2 pi k, 7 pi 6, let me just put it down here, 7 pi 6 plus 2 pi k, 7 pi quarters plus 2 pi k, and then 11 pi 6 plus 2 pi k. There's all solutions. Done. All right, one thing we do have to be careful of is trig functions that do have undefineds. Tangent of x can be undefined. So we do want to look at the other answers, so the sine of x answers and the cosine of x answers, and make sure that they would work in the tangent, because if something would have been undefined, then we're in trouble. So everything's good in this problem. But as a side note, if the sine function or cosine or any other function, if we had x equals pi halves or 3 pi halves as answers in this problem, then technically they would not really be answers because tangent of pi halves would have been undefined. So these would have been erased or not included, not actual answers. Okay, so some other trig function might have found those as answers, but if they did, they would have to just be crossed out anyway. Okay, so careful of some of the trig functions. Let me just mark that. And let's add one other note. So careful of the other trig functions being tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosecant. Tangent, cotangent, secant, cosecant, because they can have undefined as answers. Because they can be undefined. Whereas sine and cosine are fine. Okay, so if you get an answer and if you get an angle, we know we could plug it in and always get a number out of sine or cosine. Okay, so that's that side note. So it can happen, just be careful. All right, let's take a look at this next one. So this is the same deal. It's if you have a factored expression set equal to 0, and that's probably what they will have. So if it was any other number, then we would have to FOIL. But I don't think they do that in these problems at all. I didn't find one. Okay, so what we're going to do is still set each of them equal to 0. Like that. And then we'll continue solving. All right, so first I like to just get all of the trig functions by themselves. So this first one, all we have to do is add 1. The second one, we should subtract 4. So 2 secant of x equals -4. And then we should divide by 2. So secant of x is -2. And then, well, I don't like secant, so I'm going to change it to cosine and then flip the -2 to be -1/2. There we are. And then the last one, if we subtract 3, we would have 2 sine of x equals -3. And then divide by 2, we'd have sine of x equals -3/2. All right, and then now I'm going to do the same deal that I did on the last one. I've got my unit circle, and I'm going to, let me do a different color than black to do the first one. So I'm going to do the cotangent of x equals 1 in blue. Now, if you don't like cotangent, you can change it to be tangent and then flip the number. Well, flipping 1 is still 1. Okay, so if you don't like cotangent, you could do tangent. Either way, because it's equal to 1, our answer would be in quadrant 1 at pi quarters and quadrant 3 at 5 pi quarters. Okay, and then our next one, cosine of x equaling -1/2. Well, that's an x coordinate. That's -1/2. So that is in quadrant 2 up there with 2 pi thirds. And also in quadrant 3 about there at 4 pi thirds. Okay, so there's our 4 answers, or so far. And actually they will be the only 4 because this one, I'll mark it in green, sine of x equaling -3/2. Well, again, this, remember our trig stuff, or even if you said, oh, that's not on the unit circle, and they probably want me to use a calculator. But if there's a no calculator allowed rule on, say, a test, then you get this, then we need to make sure we understand what's happening. That's a y coordinate of -3/2. Well, remember, the smallest the y coordinate could have been for sine function is right there. I don't really want to mark it too hard because it's not going to be part of the answer. -3/2 would be somewhere below that, somewhere down here somewhere. Okay, so that means it's not on the unit circle. So this part has no solution, which means it just goes away. Who cares about it? All right, so we only care about the answers that we did officially find. So we had pi quarters, 2 pi thirds, 5 pi fourths, and 4 pi thirds only. Okay, so sometimes you get information that won't matter, and it just, for math, most of the time it just goes away. We don't really care about it. All right, so these 4 answers we're just going to rewrite. So our angle was x, and we're writing them. I'm just putting them in order and just making sure I add 2 pi k to them. So I have pi fourths plus 2 pi k, comma 2 pi thirds plus 2 pi k, comma, 5 pi fourths plus 2 pi k, comma, and then 4 pi thirds plus 2 pi k. And then there's all solutions. Okay, so if it's completely factored, they're actually kind of nice, I think. Most of the time, it's just kind of multiple problems in one, and use that unit circle. Okay, so thanks for watching. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Otherwise, see you next time.